Excuse me, young lady. Claudia, the flight attendant, said, her tone firm, but polite. First class is reserved for paying passengers. Zara, the young black girl, blinked, momentarily stunned. She looked down at her boarding pass, then back at Claudia. I am a first-class passenger, she replied, her voice steady but soft. Here's my ticket. There must have been a mistake. You don't belong here in Douth if you don't comply. I'll have to escalate this and call security, Claudia said firmly. Little did she know that very girl she just humiliated was the daughter of the airline's owner and would expose her long-serving prejudice. As we delve into this story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments and click on the subscribe button if you believe everyone should be treated fairly without prejudice, no matter who they are. The airport was alive with the hum of activity. Travelers moved briskly in suitcases, rolled across polished floors. There were announcements over the intercom, hurried footsteps of travelers, and the occasional laughter of families embarking on new adventures. Among the crowd and among the sea of passengers, Zara Bennett stood out, not because she sought attention, but because of the quiet confidence she carried. Zara stood quietly clutching her first-class boarding pass. She was a polite, ink-composed teenager, her excitement tempered by her natural shyness. Today was a big day for Zara, as this flight was not just a journey but a celebration, a moment too. Her new achievements as she just finished her study after winning a prestigious scholarship to study in the States. Dressed in a sleek outfit that exuded effortless style, Zara walked through the exclusive first class lounge, her boy in, pass in hand, the lounge with its plush leather chairs, ambient lighting, and soft jazz. Music playing in the background was a sanctuary of comfort and privilege. Around her, travelers sipped on complimentary lattes, read newspapers, and tapped away on laptops. Zara settled into one of the cozy armchairs. Placing her phone and coffee on the table in front of her, she glanced at her boarding pass for the nth time, not out of doubt, but out of anticipation. The first-class seat wasn't a luxury she flaunted, but it was one she had every right to enjoy. As Zara scrolled through her phone, a message from her father popped up: about to board, let me know when you're settled. Zara replied, almost there, I'll text once I'm on the plane, everything's fine. Zara's father, Victor Bennett, wasn't just a proud dad, he was the owner of the very airline she was about to fly on, but his humble nature meant he rarely flaunted his status. Zara had grown up watching him treat everyone from the cleaning crew to board executives with the same level of respect. She had always admired his humility. Despite his immense success, he had instilled in her the values of respect and kindness. Not many people knew Zara was his daughter. Victor preferred to keep family matters private, and Zara liked it that way. She glanced out at the tarmac, her thoughts momentarily drifting. She hadn't been home in over 2 years, having lived in another state for school. While she cherished the independence being away from her family, and especially her father, Victor Bennett, hadn't been easy, this trip felt different. It was more than just a flight. It was a return to the life she had been missing. She boarded the flight. She was excited for what lay ahead. A reunion with her father, the special dinner organized to welcome her back home, and the chance to reflect on how far they had come as a family. But Zara couldn't have predicted the challenges she would face on that plane, and neither could Claudia, the flight attendant, know how much trouble her prejudice was going to cause her on this trip. Across the lounge, as she returned to her PHPH, she noticed a pair of flight attendants standing near the service. Countered one of them, a woman with sharp features and a tightly wound bun, glanced in Zara's direction. Claudia Harper. The lead flight attendant exchanged a smirk with her colleague. First class is getting too accessible, Claudia muttered under her breath. Her tone carried an air of superiority, as if certain passengers didn't deserve to share the space. Her colleague chuckled nervously, but didn't respond. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Zara stood adjusting her carry-on and made her way toward the gate, joining the first-class line. Claudia, now stationed at the entrance too, the plane scanned each passenger's boarding pass with a practiced smile. Welcome aboard, she said warmly, to an older white man in a tailored suit. To another woman holding a designer purse, Claudia chirped, enjoy your flight. When Zara reached the front of the line, Claudia's demeanor shifted ever so slightly. She scanned Zara's pass, her eyes narrowing briefly. The ticket clearly read first class, but instead of directing Zara to her rightful seat, Claudia plastered on a tight smile. Oh, economy is just down the aisle, Claudia said, pointing toward the back of the plane. Zara blinked, Surprised this pass says first class, she replied, holding it up for Claudia to see. Claudia didn't falter. There must have been a mistake, please. Head to economy? Her tone was polite on the surface, but carried an undeniable edge of dismissal. Zara's grip tightened on her carry-on, but her voice remained calm. There's no mistake, this is my seat in first class. Passengers behind Zara began shifting impatiently, the tension at the gate growing. Claudia leaned closer, her voice dropping slightly. Look, I don't want you to cause a scene, just head to economy so we can keep things moving. Have you ever been treated unjustly just because they thought you didn't belong? What would you do in Zara's situation? Share your thoughts in the comment below, and don't forget to click on the subscribe button now if you love this story. Refusing to back down, Zara stepped onto the plane, her posture unwavering. Claudia's eyes followed her, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. Zara walked to her assigned seat in first class and placed her carry-on in the overhead bin. The cabin was immaculate, with spacious seats and a calming ambience. Zara settled into her seat, adjusting the window shade slightly. Moments later, Claudia entered the cabin. She was a seasoned professional, known for her non-nonsense demeanor and sharp eye for detail. Her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She approached Zara's row, her face set in a mask of professional politeness. She glanced at Zara, her expression unreadable, and raised a hand to stop her. Excuse me, young lady, Claudia said, her tone firm, but polite first class is reserved for paying passengers. Zara blinked, momentarily stunned. She looked down at her boarding pass, then back at Claudia. I am a first-class passenger, she replied, her voice steady but soft. Here's my ticket. She extended the pass to Claudia, expecting the matter to be resolved quickly, but Claudia didn't take the ticket. Instead, she crossed her arms and gave Zara a skeptical look. I don't think so, Claudia said dismissively. Step aside while I handle this. The words hit Zara like a slap. She stood frozen for a moment, unsure of how to respond.
Around her.
The murmurs began. Passengers in the economy line were starting to notice the interaction. Some exchanged pitying glances, others whispered judgments. Zara could feel their eyes on her, each glance a reminder of the humiliation she was enduring. Claudia didn't stop there. She took a step forward, her voice growing sharper. Let me see your ticket again. Are you sure you didn't accidentally take someone else's pass? She held out the ticket once more, her hands trembling slightly. It's mine, she said quietly. This is my ticket. Zara said quietly but firmly. It's not a mistake, my father bought it for me. Claudia raised an eyebrow, her tone laced with doubt. Your father? And where is he now? He's waiting for me at our destination, Zara answered. Claudia let out a small scoff, glancing around as if to find validation for her disbelief. Claudia hesitated, her eyes flicking to the ticket and then back to Zara. I'm going to need to verify this, she said curtly. Wait here. Zara sat motionless, the knot of humiliation tightening in her chest. Round her passengers whispered, some looked at her with pity, while others wore judgmental expressions. No one stepped forward to help or question what was happening. Zara felt the sting of isolation, but her father's words echoed in her mind, always carry yourself with dignity, even when others don't. Still, it was hard not to let the emotions overwhelm her. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of who she was, Zara Bennett, daughter of a man who built an empire from the ground up. A man who taught her that respect was something no one could take from her. As Claudia walked away, Zara stood alone, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Passengers continued to glance her way, their murmurs growing louder.
Right, Claudia
returned a few minutes later. Excuse me, she began, her voice louder than necessary. I need to ask you to go to the economy section. This seat has been assigned to someone else that belongs to this kind of section. Several passengers turned their heads at the commotion. Zara calmly reached for her boarding pass again, holding it up without a word. But this is my seat. How can it be assigned to someone else? Zara asked firmly. Claudia crossed her arms, her polite mask slipping. If you don't comply, I'll have to escalate this and call security. The tension in the cabin was high as Zara met Claudia's gaze with quiet determination. The standoff had only just begun. Whispers spread like wildfire among the passengers. A businessman leaned toward his companion, muttering, "Looks like someone's trying their luck." Across the aisle, an older woman frowned, her expression disapproving. "This doesn't seem right," she murmured under her breath. But not everyone was on Zara's side. A man seated a few rows back muttered, "Well, if she doesn't belong here, the attendant has every right to question her." Claudia, determined to assert her authority and unwilling to back down, took the ultimate step. She called for security. Minutes later, 2 officers boarded the plane, their presence adding a new layer of tension to the unfolding drama. They approached Zara's seat, their expressions professional but firm. Zara calmly explained. The situation showed her boarding pass, her voice steady as she defended her right to sit where she belonged. But Claudia's narrative prevailed, the officers deferring to her authority. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, his voice low but authoritative, "we've been asked to escort you to another seat." Zara met their gaze, her voice calm as she explained the situation. "This is my assigned seat," she said, holding up her boarding pass for them to see. "I have every right to be here." The officers hesitated, glancing at Claudia for confirmation. She nodded sharply, her expression one of vindication. "Her seat is in economy," she said firmly. Despite Zara's protests and her valid ticket, the officers deferred to Claudia's authority. They escorted Zara to economy. The whispers and stares of passengers followed her down the aisle. Composure never faltered, but the humiliation was clear. Back in first class, Claudia returned with an air of triumph. She walked through the cabin with a satisfied smile, her voice carrying just enough to ensure she was heard. "That's how you handle troublemakers," she said to a fellow flight attendant. Then glancing around at the passengers, she added smugly, "First class is for people who belong here." Humiliated but composed, Zara walked to her new seat. Passengers craned their necks to watch their reactions, mixed, some indifferent, others sympathetic, a few smugly satisfied. In first class, Claudia strode through the cabin, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. A smug smile spread across her face as she glanced at her. That girl doesn't even look like she belonged in first class, yet she's trying to claim it. "This cabin is only for people who belong here," she said, her tone dripping with self-satisfaction. Was Claudia right to have judged Zara because of her skin color? Let us know in the comments, and if you believe in justice for all, hit that subscribe button for more stories like this. As the flight continued, the quiet hum of the cabin seemed to contrast sharply with the tension lingering in the air. Zara sat in her economy seat, her posture upright and her expression composed. Outwardly, she appeared calm, but inside the frustration gnawed at her. She glanced down at her phone, the unsent text to her father still on the screen. "This isn't right. Dad, why didn't they believe me?" But she hesitated to send it, knowing he'd act immediately, and likely not subtly. Zara stayed calm, yet it wasn't easy. She could feel the weight of Claudia's judgment with every skeptical glance, every dismissive remark. It wasn't just the embarrassment of being questioned, it was the underlying message that she didn't belong, that she wasn't enough. But Zara wasn't about to let those feelings consume her. She took a deep breath, even as the murmurs from other passengers grew louder. Even as the stares became harder to ignore, Zara held her head high. Inside, she felt the sting of humiliation, but she wouldn't let it show. Meanwhile, in first class, fellow flight attendant questioned Claudia on why she took those actions on the little girl. Claudia replied, her tone smug. She thought she could just walk in and claim whatever she wants. Claudia said loud enough for nearby passengers to overhear. "But it takes experience to see through that kind of nonsense, and I had to put her where she rightly belongs." A few passengers gave polite chuckles. Others exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that her comments were anything but professional. Seated in economy, Zara kept her composure despite the humiliation she had just endured. Her first-class ticket, the validation of her rightful place, now felt like a cruel joke. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed a message to her father. "Dad, they moved me to economy. The flight attendant claimed my seat was a mistake." Victor Bennett's reply came almost instantly. His messages were short to the point, but filled with reassurance. "Stay calm. I'll handle it. Let me know if anything else happens." Zara stared at the screen for a moment. Her father's unwavering support giving her strength, she took a deep breath, slipping her phone back into her bag. For now, she would wait, trusting that her father's intervention would come at the right time. A little later, Zara got up to stretch her legs, heading toward the bathroom at the back of the plane. As she waited, she heard a soft voice behind her. "I saw what happened earlier." Zara turned to see an older woman from first class. Her kind eyes were filled with concern, and her tone carried a mix of empathy and quiet indignation. "That wasn't right," the woman continued softly. "You didn't deserve to be treated like that. If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know." For a moment, Zara was caught off guard by the woman's kindness. She managed a small smile. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate it, but I'll be okay." The woman nodded, placing a gentle hand on Zara's arm. "You're handling this with such grace. It's more than most people would manage." She gave Zara an encouraging smile before returning to her seat. Back in first class, Claudia Harper was still basking in her perceived victory. She leaned against the galley, her voice carrying as she spoke to her colleagues. Her colleagues exchanged uncertain glances, the unease in their expressions growing as they listened. Some who overheard her boasting whispered among themselves. Few shook their heads in silent disapproval, but no one spoke up directly. Claudia, however, remained oblivious. Her confidence swelled as she continued. "Honestly, I'm doing them a favor. It's about maintaining standards. If we let anyone in, it's chaos." Seated in the cramped confines of economy, Zara tried her best to remain composed. Her hands rested lightly on her lap, her breathing steady, but inside, frustration bubbled just beneath the surface.
Ow.
She stared out of the small window at the endless expanse of clouds, hoping to distract herself from the gnawing sense of unfairness that had followed her since boarding the plane.
S.
After a few moments, she decided to do something simple, something that would shift her focus even for a little while. Zara pressed the small call button above her seat, the soft chime barely audible over the hum of the plane. She leaned back slightly, waiting patiently for someone to approach. Several minutes passed. Zara noticed other flight attendants moving up and down the aisle, tending to passengers with quiet efficiency, but none of them came to her row. Finally, she spotted Claudia Harper making her way toward her section. Claudia's expression was unreadable, her polished exterior still intact, but there was an unmistakable edge to her movements. She stopped abruptly by Zara's row, her voice sharp and devoid of warmth as she asked yes. Zara looked up at her meeting, her gaze with quiet politeness. "Could I have a glass of water, please?" she asked, her tone measured and calm. Claudia's response was immediate but curt. She offered a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sure," she said, her voice clipped before. Turning on her heel and walking away without another word, Zara watched her retreating figure, her expression calm but questioning. She glanced at her watch. A few minutes passed, then 10, still no water arrived. Zara's eyes followed Claudia as she moved through the first-class cabin. She watched as the flight attendant carefully served drinks to other passengers, offering them. Her practiced smile and engaging in light conversation, Claudia's gestures seemed almost exaggerated, as if she wanted to make a show of her efficiency and attentiveness, but all the while she avoided Zara's section entirely. The deliberate nature of it wasn't lost on Zara. She pressed the call button again, her patience beginning to wear thin. This time, the soft chime felt louder in her ears, an almost mocking sound that underscored her growing frustration. Claudia finally returned to the economy section, her movements slower, almost reluctant. She approached Zara's row, her expression now tinged with something resembling annoyance. "Yes," she asked again, her tone sharp enough to make some nearby passengers glance up. Zara kept her voice calm, though it required effort. "I requested water earlier," she said. "Can I get it now?" For a moment, Claudia said nothing, then her tight-lipped smile returned a deliberate and insincere gesture. "I'll get to it," she said, her voice dripping with indifference. Without giving Zara a chance to respond, she disappeared. Back into first class, Zara's calm facade began to crack. The deliberate hostility of the situation was unmistakable now. She felt the sting of humiliation settle deeper in her chest as she glanced around. Did anyone else notice what was happening? Were they ignoring it, or was she truly alone in this? Her eyes dropped to her phone, the screen still glowing with her father's earlier message. "Stay calm. I'll handle it. Let me know if anything else happens." She tapped the screen and began typing, her fingers moving with quiet urgency. "Dad, the flight." The The attendant is targeting me. She's deliberately ignoring my requests and making me feel so unwelcome. It's becoming unbearable. Zara stared at the words for a brief moment before pressing send, the finality of her action bringing both relief and frustration. Her father's reply came almost immediately, as it always did. "Stay where you are. I'm making the call now." The response was short but carried weight. Zara knew her father wasn't one to let things slide. If he said he was making a call, he meant business. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself once more as she waited. The weight of the situation pressed down on her like an invisible force. She couldn't help but glance around, wondering if any of the other passengers had noticed the way she was being treated. Her eyes caught a few sympathetic glances, but nothing more. The silence of their inaction felt almost as isolating as Claudia's behavior. Her thoughts were interrupted by a quiet movement nearby. A young girl who was seated in economy class 2 approached Zara. Her expression was kind but filled with a quiet determination. She leaned in slightly, her voice soft yet firm. "That flight attendant is always wicked to any black person she sees. She feels we don't belong and can't get first-class tickets. That kind of behavior shouldn't be tolerated. I hope she gets karma soon for all she has done to you," she said, her tone carrying an air of quiet outrage. Zara blinked her composure, faltering slightly in the face of the girl's sincerity. "Thank you, she definitely will be getting her karma today," she said softly, her voice steady but laced with emotion. Zara offered a small, grateful smile. "I appreciate that," she said, her voice genuine, "but I'll be okay. Thank you for speaking up, it means a lot." The girl nodded, her presence leaving Zara with a flicker of warmth amid the tension as she walked away. Zara returned her focus to the situation at hand. Her father had said he was making the call. All she could do now was wait. Midway through the flight, as the plane cruised above the clouds, the calm hum of the cockpit was interrupted by the sound of the secure line ringing. The captain, a seasoned professional with years of experience under his belt, picked up the receiver. His expression was neutral at first, his eyes scanning the instruments out of habit, but as the voice on the other end spoke, his demeanor shifted. His brows furrowed slightly and his posture straightened. The voice belonged to Victor Bennett, the owner of the airline. Despite the calm and measured tone, there was no mistaking the authority behind his words. Victor's instructions were clear and deliberate, leaving no room for interpretation. "Yes, sir," the captain responded, his voice steady, but carrying a new weight of urgency. "Understood." The conversation was brief, lasting no more than a minute, but its impact lingered long after the call ended. As the captain placed the receiver back in its cradle, he exhaled slowly. He knew that when someone like Victor Bennett made a call mid-flight, it wasn't a casual inquiry, it was a direct intervention. After a moment's thought, the captain activated the intercom, summoning the head flight attendant. Claudia Harper, still in the first-class cabin, was in the middle of a boastful conversation with her colleague. It was then that she felt the tap on her shoulder. Startled, she turned to find the captain standing behind her. His face was composed, but his serious expression immediately caught her attention. Claudia's initial annoyance at being interrupted quickly gave way to apprehension. "Miss Harper," the captain said, his tone firm but controlled, "I need to speak with you." Claudia straightened her posture, trying to maintain her usual air of confidence. "Of course," she said, her voice crisp. "What's the matter?" The captain wasted no time. "I've just received a call from Mr. Victor Bennett," he began, pausing to let the name sink in. Claudia's brow furrowed, her confidence wavering for the first time. "Victor Bennett," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," the captain confirmed, his tone steady, "the owner of the airline. He's been informed about an incident involving his daughter on the plane." At the mention of Zara, Claudia's face paled to pieces, began to fall into place. Then the realization hit her like a cold wave. Her carefully constructed narrative about handling troublemakers suddenly felt flimsy and inadequate. The captain continued, his voice carrying an air of finality. "Mr. Bennett has instructed me to let you know that he will be meeting the plane personally upon landing. He expects an explanation, and from now on he wants you to take care of her well and treat her in the best way you can." For a moment, Claudia stood frozen, her mind racing, the color drained from her face as the weight of the situation fully registered. I didn't realize," she stammered, her usual sharpness replaced by hesitation. The captain's expression didn't change. "That's irrelevant," he said. "What matters is how this situation was handled." Claudia's usual bravado cracked under the pressure. She nodded stiffly, her throat dry, as she managed to say, "Understood." As the captain turned and walked back to the cockpit, Claudia remained rooted in place. The confidence she had so proudly displayed throughout the flight was now a distant memory. She muttered under her breath, almost as if trying to reassure herself. "I'm sure it's nothing," but her words lacked conviction. The unease gnawed at her, growing stronger with each passing minute. For the rest of the flight, Claudia's demeanor was noticeably subdued. Her steps, once brisk and purposeful, were slower and more hesitant. The smug remarks that had flowed so freely earlier were now absent, replaced by a tense silence. Passengers who had observed her earlier behavior couldn't help but notice the change. Whispers rippled through the cabin, their tones ranging from curiosity to quiet satisfaction. Claudia, however, avoided meeting anyone's gaze. Her mind was consumed with one thought: the confrontation awaiting her upon landing. For Claudia Harper, the moments after the captain's words were nothing short of harrowing. The revelation that Zara Bennett was the daughter of Victor Bennett, the airline's owner, had shattered her confidence. Every step she took in the cabin felt heavier, her previously brisk and self-assured demeanor replaced with nervous hesitation. The words, "He will be meeting the plane personally upon landing," echoed relentlessly in her mind, like a warning bell she could not silence. Claudia tried to carry on with her duties. She picked up a tray to offer refreshments, her hands trembling slightly. Approaching a passenger in first class, she forced a smile, but her voice faltered. "Would you like a drink?" she asked, barely meeting their gaze. The passenger frowned, confused by her sudden change in tone, but accepted the drink without comment. Her colleagues, who had grown used to her assertiveness, now exchanged curious glances. Claudia's usual sharpness was gone, replaced by visible unease. Her hands fumbled as she collected empty glasses, and she avoided making eye contact with passengers. Whispers began circulating among the crew and those seated nearby. "What's wrong with her?" one colleague asked another. "She looks like she's seen a ghost." But Claudia's distraction wasn't mere internal struggle, it began to seep into her work. She misread passenger requests, served items to the wrong rows, and forgot orders she had just taken. Passengers noticed her repeated trips to the galley, where she lingered longer than necessary, her hands gripping the counters as if trying to steady herself. The confidence she once exuded had vanished entirely. Finally, Claudia reached a breaking point. She glanced toward economy, where Zara sat, her composure still intact, despite everything that had happened. Zara was scrolling through her phone, a faint, knowing smile on her lips. Claudia felt her stomach tighten. She couldn't bear the thought of Victor Bennett boarding the plane and addressing her directly without attempting to make things right, swallowing her pride. Claudia grabbed a tray and made her way toward Zara's seat. Her heart pounded as she approached, each step feeling like a trial. Stopping beside Zara's row, she cleared her throat awkwardly. "Miss Bennett," she began, her voice uncharacteristically soft, "can I get you anything, a drink, a snack, perhaps a hot towel?" Zara looked up, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. "No, thank you," she said politely, her tone calm yet distant. Claudia hesitated, the forced smile on her face slipping slightly. "Are you sure? Anything at all, please, just let me know." Zara shook her head. "I'm fine." The rejection stung, but Claudia wasn't ready to give up. Over the next hour, she made repeated trips to Zara's row, offering everything she could think of: extra blankets, premium snacks, even a meal upgrade. Each time, Zara declined her responses, unfailingly polite yet firm. The other passengers watched the interactions unfold with growing curiosity. Whispers filled the cabin as people wondered aloud what had prompted Claudia's sudden change in behavior. "She's never this attentive," one passenger murmured to their companion. "Something must have happened. I've never seen her like this," said another, shaking their head. "She's practically falling over herself." Zara, however, wasn't surprised. She knew the shift in Claudia's attitude wasn't genuine remorse, it was fear. Each time Claudia approached her, Zara met her with the same composed smile, silently reminding the flight attendant that her attempts to undo the damage were futile. Eventually, Claudia abandoned the tray altogether and approached Zara empty-handed. Her expression was strained, her usual air of authority replaced by a desperate need to resolve the situation. She crouched slightly, lowering herself to Zara's eye level. "Miss Bennet," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for earlier. It was a misunderstanding on my part. I didn't realize." She trailed off, unsure of how to finish the sentence without incriminating herself further. I hope we can just put this behind us." Zara studied her for a moment, her calm demeanor unshaken. Then with measured words she replied, "The matter is no longer in my hands." Claudia blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "My father is handling it now," Zara continued, her tone steady but firm. "He's the one who will decide whether or not you're forgiven." Claudia's face fell. Her earlier composure crumbling further, she opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The weight of Zara's statement hung in the air, leaving no room for negotiation. For the first time, Claudia understood the gravity of her actions and that the consequences were entirely out of her control. Zara turned her attention back to her phone, signaling that the conversation was over. Claudia stood there for a moment longer, her thoughts racing before retreating to the galley. The other passengers, who had been watching the exchange with rapt attention, whispered among themselves, their curiosity and speculation growing. For Zara, however, the situation was clear. She had endured humiliation and hostility. But the balance of power had shifted. As she glanced out the window, a faint smile crossed her lips. This was only the beginning. Do you think Claudia should be forgiven? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to click the subscribe button now. As the plane landed smoothly on the runway, passengers gathered their belongings, preparing to disembark. But many had noticed the unusual activity outside. Through the windows, they saw a sleek black SUV pull up directly beside the aircraft, its polished surface gleaming under the airport light. The door opened, and out stepped Victor Bennet, the owner of the airline. His presence alone was commanding, but he was flanked by two senior executives, making it clear that this was no ordinary visit. Inside the plane, the whispers started almost immediately. "Who's that one?" passenger asked, nudging their seatmate. "He looks important." "It's Victor Bennet," another murmured, eyes widening. "He owns the airline. What's he doing here?" Victor ascended the stairs to the aircraft with a purposeful stride, his expression calm but serious. As he entered the cabin, the atmosphere shifted, conversations hushed, and all eyes turned to him. Scanned the rows briefly, his gaze landing on Zara, who was seated in economy. His expression softened as he walked straight to her, the lines of tension on his face easing momentarily. When he reached her, he crouched slightly to meet her eye level. His voice, warm and gentle, broke the silence. "Are you all right?" he asked, his concern evident. Zara looked up at him, her composed exterior betraying a flicker of relief. "I'm okay," she replied, though her tone carried traces of lingering frustration. "It's just been a lot." Victor placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's over now," he said softly. "You won't have to deal with this any longer." Straightening, Victor's expression shifted. The warmth he reserved for his daughter disappeared, replaced by a calm but firm authority. He turned his attention to Claudia Harper, who stood frozen at the front of the cabin. Her face was pale, her usual sharpness completely absent. The realization that Victor Bennet had come for her was written all over her features. "Miss Harper," Victor began, his voice steady and measured, "I understand there was an issue with my daughter's seat." Claudia's composure crumbled entirely, her lips parted as if to speak, but for a moment no sound came out. Finally she stammered, I didn't know she was your daughter, sir. It was a misunderstanding." Victor's gaze remained fixed on her. Unflinching, his tone didn't rise, but the weight of his words was unmistakable. "The issue isn't whether you knew she was my daughter," said his voice calm, "but cutting the issue is how you treated her, and likely how you treat others who don't meet your assumptions." Claudia's face reddened, and she tried to respond, but her words tumbled out incoherently. "I didn't mean to. I didn't realize." Victor raised a hand, slightly silencing her attempts at justification. "Your behavior today has been nothing short of unacceptable," he continued, addressing not only Claudia, but the entire cabin. "This airline was built on the principles of respect and dignity. Our success has come from treating every passenger, regardless of who they are or where they come from, with fairness and professionalism." Your actions today have failed those values. The cabin, silent moments ago, erupted in applause. Passengers clapped enthusiastically, their approval of Victor's words echoing through the space. Some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged glances. Satisfied that Claudia's actions were being addressed, Claudia, however, looked mortified. Her head hung low and her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the service cart for balance. The applause felt like an indictment, each clap amplifying her humiliation. She opened her mouth to apologize again, but Victor didn't give her the chance. Effective immediately, he said, turning to the airline executives flanking him, Miss Harper is to be removed from duty. Her behavior today does not align with the standards of this airline, and she will be held accountable. One of the executives nodded and gestured toward Claudia. Miss Harper, please come with us, he said firmly. Claudia looked around, her face a mix of shame and desperation. She glanced briefly at Zara, who met her gaze with a calm, composed expression. There was no malice in Zara's eyes, but there was also no forgiveness, only a quiet certainty that justice was being served. As Claudia was escorted off the plane, passengers whispered among themselves, some commenting on the poetic justice of the situation. She had it coming, one muttered. You can't treat people like that and get away with it. Back in her seat, Zara watched the scene unfold, her emotions a mix of relief and quiet vindication. Her father returned to her side, his presence a steadying force. Are you sure you're okay? He asked again, his voice gentle. Zara nodded. I'm fine now, she said, her tone stronger than before. Thank you, Dad. Victor gave her a small smile. You never have to thank me for standing up for you, he said. It's what I'm here for. As the plane began to empty, Zara stood with her father, their bond strengthened by the day's events. Around them, passengers continued to murmur, many casting Zara looks of admiration and respect. In the weeks following the incident, the airline wasted no time addressing the situation. Victor Bennett, deeply committed to upholding the values on which his company was built, ordered an immediate review of staff training programs. He personally worked with his leadership team to implement mandatory workshops on diversity, inclusion, and respect. These sessions were designed to ensure that no passenger, regardless of their background, would ever face the kind of treatment Zara endured. The training wasn't superficial. It was thorough, challenging employees to confront their biases and reflect on how their actions could affect others. Role-playing exercises and guest speakers were brought in to share real-world stories of discrimination and the lasting harm it causes. Employees were reminded that their role wasn't just to serve passengers, but to uphold the dignity and respect of everyone who boarded their planes. Meanwhile, Claudia Harper had been dismissed from her position after the incident. For weeks, she stayed away from the airline, reflecting on her actions. Initially, she felt a mix of embarrassment and anger, but as time passed, those feelings were replaced with regret and shame. She realized that her behavior wasn't just unprofessional, it was deeply unfair and rooted in assumptions she hadn't questioned before. One evening, as Claudia sat at her kitchen table, she opened her laptop and began to type. Her email to the airline was long and heartfelt, each word carefully chosen to convey her remorse. She apologized not just for what she had done to Zara, but for the mindset that had allowed such behavior to seem acceptable. Claudia acknowledged that she had failed as a representative of the airline's values and as a human being. I can't undo the harm I caused, she wrote, but I am committed to learning from this and ensuring it never happens again. If given the chance, I would like to prove that I've changed. When Victor Bennett read the email, he saw sincerity in Claudia's words. After discussing it with his team, they decided to give her a second chance under strict probationary terms.
Claudia
Was invited to return to work, but with a clear understanding her actions would be monitored and any further incidents of unprofessionalism or prejudice would result in immediate dismissal. Claudia turned to the airline, humbled and determined to make amends. She threw herself into the training sessions, often volunteering to speak about her own experience, how it had changed her perspective. Over time, her colleagues noticed a transformation. She was no longer the flight attendant who dismissed others based on assumptions. Instead, she became someone who went out of her way to ensure that every passenger felt valued. Victor Bennett, meanwhile, I took the opportunity to speak publicly about the incident at a press conference held weeks after the flight. He addressed the media with a calm but resolute demeanor. "Inclusion is not optional. It's a responsibility," he began, his voice steady. "Privilege comes with responsibility, whether it's the privilege of serving as a flight attendant or the privilege of sitting in first class. We all have a duty to treat each other with respect and dignity. No one should ever feel unwelcome or unworthy because of their appearance or background." His words struck a chord, and the story quickly went viral. Social media platforms buzzed with conversations about prejudice and accountability. Hashtags like "inclusion matters" and "respect for all" trended for days. Many praised Victor's leadership and transparency, while others shared their own experiences with discrimination, using the story as a springboard for broader discussions. For Zara, the experience became a turning point in her life. Reflecting on everything that had happened, she realized how much she had learned. It's about strength, resilience, and the power of standing up for oneself. Her father's unwavering support had shown her that dignity and respect were non-negotiable values, and she carried those lessons with her. Zara also saw the ripple effect of the incident. The airline's new training programs, the viral conversations, online, and even Claudia's transformation were all proof that change was possible. Though the experience had been painful, it had also been empowering. This brings us back to the skies. Weeks later, Zara and Victor found themselves on another flight, seated side by side in first class. Zara glanced around, observing the crew as they worked. Their movements were professional, their smiles genuine, and their interactions respectful. There was no hesitation or judgment, only the seamless service her father's airline was known for. As one of the flight attendants offered her a drink with a warm smile, Zara returned the gesture. She looked over at her father and smiled knowingly. This flight was a far cry from the last one, and the change was palpable. It wasn't just about the crew, it was about the empowerment she felt in herself. Zara knew she had emerged from the experience stronger and more self-assured than ever. She leaned back in her seat, a quiet sense of satisfaction washing over her. Change wasn't always easy, but it was always worth fighting for. If you believe in standing up for fairness, equality, and respect for everyone, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this. See you in the next one.